So this is the story of how the PMP made me what I call a identity change agent. When I came to the business school in 1984 as a student, I knew how to change people's behavior. Carrots and sticks, rewards and punishments. And then I met Jim March. How many had a class from Jim March? He taught me another way to change people's behavior. And in Chip Heath's fantastic book, Switch, How to Make Change When Change is Hard, he talks about Hope Lab, which is a Bay Area nonprofit that, among other things, works with teenagers who have cancer. And what they found is these teenagers who have complicated sets of medicines that if they take, they have a much more good chance of survival. But these kids were not taking their medicines. So Hope Lab created a video game called Remission, featuring the strong warrior Roxy, R-O-X-X-I. And 20 levels, every level of the game had some information about how it's important for you to take your medicine. They found out that the kids who took only 1 or 2 levels of the game started taking their medicines just as much as the people who went all through 20 levels. So what's going on here? So it turns out it wasn't about information at all. They knew they were supposed to take their medicines. But when they took their medicines, they felt like a victim. And they didn't like feeling it that way, so they went into denial and didn't take their medicines. But once they dipped their toes into the video game and got a taste of Roxy, now they realized that by taking their medicine, they were becoming a warrior against cancer. They changed the way they thought about themselves. They changed their identity. And what Jim March taught me is that the best way to change people's behavior is to change the way they think about themselves. Identity is what we try to live up to so we can look ourselves in the mirror. I came to business school thinking I'm going to be a titan of industry, or at least a high-tech biz guy. And then, my wife reminded me this week, and I was talking to her about this. She said, "Boy, you really hated that high-tech job you had right after business school." My mom told me years later, she said, when you were working for that high-tech company, the sparkle had gone out of your eyes. Fortunately, the director of the PMP position came open, and I don't know what got into him, but Jim Patel hired me. It was early in the week. I called up. It was after my interviews, and I called him up and said, what's going on? And he said, well, if you call me on Friday afternoon, I'll have some news for you. And it was clear, I think I might get this job. But that week, we were camping in Yosemite, and so Gabriel and Sandra and I were hiking up to Nevada Falls. We got back down on Friday afternoon after 6 o'clock, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have to wait all weekend. But I called, and Jim Patel, not surprisingly, was at work after 6 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And he told me I was going to be the next director of the public management program. I spent the entire night. Sandy and Gabby went into the tent eventually and went to sleep. I spent the whole night staring at the campfire thinking about how my life was going to change. My wife, Sandra, who is my spiritual guide, and I call her a saint in training, had this great comment. She went through business school with me, and she said, a lot of your classmates suffer from an unmet need for altruism. And I really thought about that being a make a lot of money MBA guy isn't really enough. That for a Stanford Business School alum, you also need to be a leader in public service. And I think we all should recognize the impact that the PMP has had on the GSB in changing this entire place. Meanwhile, my son Gabriel, who second from the left at the top, you can probably guess which one of those is me, had more hair and less of something else. Anyway, I got involved with coaching, basketball and baseball, didn't know enough about soccer to do that. And John Gardner, who I'm sure many of you know, I had the good fortune to have as a mentor, and he really encouraged me to take this idea nationwide, do something with this idea of positive coaching, using sports to develop what we call major league people. John was the head of the Carnegie Foundation at one time, and he said he commissioned a lot of academics to do studies and then write books. And many of them did the studies but didn't write the book. And one day he said to me, this was after my first book, Positive Coaching, came out. He said, Jim, you're a book writer. And I think, wow, again, change in my identity. I'm now a book writer. without even realizing it, I became a social entrepreneur, a term that I had never even heard when I came into business school in 1984. Positive Coaching Alliance now, across the country, we've trained almost 500,000 adults in how to get the best out of kids. Phil Jackson's our national spokesperson. Last 2 years, the last 3 years, the Celtics and the Lakers played in the finals. They had a real hard time deciding who to root for. Summer Sanders, who was a swimmer here at Stanford. And so what is Positive Coaching Alliance all about? It's right back to the same thing. It's about identity. So if those of you who followed college basketball last March in the March Madness, Coach A, who shall remain nameless, brought a strong team into the tournament, flamed out early, got beat by a team that nobody thought they were going to get beat by. Afterwards, he was asked on national television about the game, and he just threw his team under the bus. You know, they just didn't come to play. I'm so disappointed in them. Blah, blah, blah. Basketball fans know this other person, Brad Stevens of Butler. Now, Butler played perhaps the worst half of basketball in NCAA finals history. They were just terrible. After the game, after losing badly to UConn, Brad Stevens was asked about the game, and he said one of the most remarkable things I've ever heard a coach say. He said, well, I guess if anybody has to lose a game the way we lost it, I guess it's a good thing that it was my guys, because they have the character to deal with it. So what does this have to do with their identity? Coach A gets all of his identity from the scoreboard, and thus when his team doesn't do well, he's not able to be there for them when they need him. Brad Stevens wants to win. I don't think anybody who knows him would say, no. But he also gets his identity from building people, and when his players needed him the most, he was able to be there for them. So we're trying to change identities. We have a model for athletes we call the triple impact competitor. It's not all about you. It's about making yourself better, yes. But leadership is about making your teammates better. And it's really about making the game better by the way you compete. So imagine if we have hundreds of thousands of youth athletes coming out of high school every year whose identity is as a triple impact competitor. And they see not only sports, but going into our society, a commitment to making themselves better, a commitment to making the people they work with better, and a commitment to making the game better. So a little bit of poetry. Robert Bly, one of my favorite poets, has a poem called Things to Think. And I'll just read one little line from it, which is, imagine that a moose emerges from a lake with a child of yours that you've never seen on its antlers. So my question is, who is this child of ours that we've never seen? It's always dicey interpreting a poem, but I think this child is the self that we could be if we devote ourselves to becoming that child. So what about the public management program? It transformed me. I think it transformed many of you. It transformed this entire school. Stanford Business School is a different place than it was before the public management program, and now it's up to us all to go out and transform the world. Thank you.